All right, 2 o'clock. I'd like to welcome everyone into the Hydroponics in Schools panel. Give a brief introduction of myself, and then we can have our panelists join us in the webinar. My name is Harrison Hillier. I'm the president of the board for the NYC Ag Collective, but I'm also the senior hydroponic systems manager at Teens for Food Justice. Our mission in a nutshell is to end food access inequality by installing vertical hydroponic farms in Title I schools around New York City. And also we opened a facility in Denver. All right, starting to bring in the panelists. So I'm excited for the opportunity to moderate this panel. Our panelists today offer a wide perspective from the nonprofit and the for-profit, as well as what it's like to work within the school systems itself, and show what a wide range of applications and modalities that can all exist while still working towards the same goal of bringing hydroponics in the schools. I'd like to remind our audience, please add any and all questions into the Q&A function so that our panelists can answer them during the discussion. And just as soon as we get our other esteemed guests in here, we can do a round of introductions. Maybe we'll just jump in and wing it. So let's start. Samantha, would you mind introducing yourself, the name of your organization, your role in it, your preferred pronouns, and where you're joining us from today?
Sure. My name is Samantha Johnson. I am the director of aquaponic programs at Commonwealth Charter Academy. I'm joining today's webinar from Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, from our aquaponic, hydroponic, and aeroponic grow facility. We are a K-12 cyber charter school, but we clearly have a physical footprint. We have many of these footprints across the state that are meant to be workforce development learning opportunities for students. Mine is ag specific, but we also have a technology-based facility, and we're going to be opening up a medical-based facility here by the end of the school year. And my preferred pronouns are she and her.
Excellent. Alexander, how about you tell us about yourself?
Hey, good afternoon. So my name is Alexander Olesen. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Babylon Microfarms. We are an on-site farming company that helps schools, businesses, and other institutional groups to grow their own fresh food using modular vertical farms that some of you may be able to see behind me. I'm from London and I'm based in Richmond, Virginia.
And your pronouns?
He, his.
Excellent. I'm fairly certain this next participant does not need an introduction, but we'll afford him the courtesy.
Well, courtesy is contagious. Hi, everybody. I'm Stephen Ritz. I'm the founder of Green Bronx Machine. I'm sorry I'm not in school with you today. I'm coming to you from a hotel room in Germany. Green Bronx Machine is a program that's now touching 600 schools over 600 schools across the nation and around the world. We are huge advocates of project-based learning. I'm humbled to be in the company of all of you far better farmers than me. Harrison, you too, just really hats off to all you guys. I'm more of a pedagogy guy and a school systems guy, but I believe that the two-headed monster is both schools and kids and food.
And your pronouns, Stephen?
Oh, my preferred pronouns are he, him.
Excellent. Last but certainly not least, Manuela, would you mind giving us a brief synopsis of what you do, where you do it, and your preferred pronouns, and where you're joining from today?
Thank you. Hi, I'm Manuela Zamora. I'm near Sunworks Executive Director. I'm joining you from Manhattan, around Lincoln Center. And I represent a large, very diverse team of 40 plus people who are working in 230 public schools from kindergarten to 12th grade, where we bring sustainability, science, and climate education through the lens of hydroponic and aquaponic farming. So we started about 10 years ago, and we work, as I say, from kindergarten to 12th grade with a year-round program where students grow food from seed to harvest and learn all about science and sustainability and climate education. Pronouns she, hers, and again, thank you for having me today.
Well, thank you for being here. Thank you again, everyone, for being on this panel. As I said, I'm excited for it. I think this is a rare opportunity. This is a rare opportunity to speak to people who work in what's a fairly small niche. There's a lot of organizations that are for profit. They're growing tonnage. They look to build their own facilities, but very few that focus narrowly on schools or partnering with schools. So just from skimming everyone's websites, you can see that some of these organizations are in hundreds of different schools, impacting thousands, like hundreds of thousands of students. And so I actually would like to ask the first question to Samantha, because you work at a single location where you opened an enormous aquaponics facility. I believe it's 6,100 square feet. I'm fairly certain that all of the farms that TFFJ has built in New York could fit within this one facility. So given this more narrow focus, what do you find was like the biggest challenge for opening this, your aquaponics facility?
My biggest challenge was really understanding all of the nuances of aquaponics and scaffolding that for K through 12 plus learners. So knowing, the the high level science for my honors students, but then needing to try to figure out how to explain it to a kindergartner, that was pretty much my biggest hurdle, all while doing that, while trying to keep everything alive and getting the system acclimated. So it was a lot of fun for me because I pulled in all the learners. I said, hey, if you want to come in and work in here, I need help. I need people that are willing to come in and just try. So that enabled me to really overcome the, hey, we need to take care of the fish and the plants, all while I have to try to figure out how to build all this curriculum from scratch at the same time. I found that the students were very passionate about sustainability, and they were very easy to convince to come in and very willing to work. As long as I could train that good group at the get, they could then cross-train the rest of the students as they came in. But I would say that was my biggest hurdle was, we had our grand opening and then it was off to the races. There wasn't really any time to pause to build the back end, to build that curriculum up.
Thank you. I see Steven's raised his hand, but before you ask your question, I'd like, as soon as you ask your question, Steven, I'd actually like yours and Manuela's perspective on working basically in the opposite paradigm, where you've got hundreds and hundreds of schools and trying to build that network, manage that. What's that like? But Steven, please, your question.
Sure. So I'm fascinated. Thank you, Samantha, for joining us. And, the thing that really caught me was this whole cyberspace, if I heard you correctly. Can you talk to me a little bit about that? And what does that look like? And what does the day look like for kids? It's something that I'm absolutely fascinated in from an administrative perspective, and also as like a fan. How cool.
So we're the second largest school in Pennsylvania. We have a little over 20,000 enrolled students, K through 12. But we recognize that not all learners learn best online. And this was prior to COVID. I've worked at the school for 17 years. So I've seen quite a bit of change happen over time. But one of the most fascinating things that I saw were just that spark for learners learning virtually. And they get to pick how they set up their day. So the parents may say, you wake up at 8, I'm going to ring a physical bell in the kitchen. You got to report to school, and they do their schoolwork from the kitchen. I have other students, high school learners, that work a full-time job. and they do their high school full time, but they do it asynchronously. So they engage with their teachers, but they really pick and choose when they do engage. The teachers have to talk to them because they have to verify they are going through their schoolwork appropriately. But the way I fit into the big puzzle is that workforce development end, that career readiness end, where I may have learners that have an interest in agriculture, have an interest in STEM sciences. And that's where I really push in to help support that learner, either virtually. Those are set days and times that they have to be available to log in to check out the work that's being done in the lab. Or if they're lucky enough that they can come physically here, we have set hours for volunteers, for internships, for mentoring. And then I even have a mobile aquaponics lab. It's just a very big truck pulling a trailer full of fish and plants, and that goes all across the state. So if we have families that just physically are not able to get here, I can send a mobile classroom to their house or as close as I can get it there to help them facilitate learning.
Kudos to you. I'm glad I asked the question.
Yeah, it's important to be able to meet people where they're at. And I think it helps them build a sense of ownership over what you're trying to impart to them. But if Manuela and Stephen, if you would, what are some of your hurdles in bringing your program to as many locations as possible? Maybe some of the compromises you've had to make to accomplish that goal. Manuela, if you'd like to start.
Yes, thank you. Well, I think the one of the challenges is was for us to come up with a standard, a kind of a standard classroom, so we could fit all our lessons. Because as I mentioned before, we cover a year round of science while the students are learning, are farming from seed to harvest. So they harvest as many times as the school year allows, but we have the standardized lessons that we want to implement throughout the school years. So that was something that it took us some time, and we're very proud of our setting, which is allows the schools who choose to partner with us to have really a variety of and access to a variety of systems, and also the latest that the market offers. With the caveat that the latest that the market offers fits into the standards that we require for teaching. So that's the compromise we need to make, and that's the in between path that we have chosen to have with the schools. It is working really well because it allows us to provide all the support, to plan for all the support, all the teacher training that we offer, and to implement the lessons that are, as again, a year-round, grade specific, therefore they can cover the science content that we offer. So that's how we came around that challenge, and that's how we build our support system also that goes boots in the ground in the 5 boroughs of New York, some areas of New Jersey, and now going up to Westchester County too.
And Stephen, anything to add into that?
Yeah, we went around it a totally different way. So Green Bronx Machine totally believes in keeping this as turnkey and teacher driven as possible. Our number one client are principals, and our number one outcome are high performing schools. Yes, we grow food, but we grow a copious amount of academics, and academics is our first and foremost. So our curriculum is not so much garden specific. It uses the lens of gardening to conquer and address all subject areas, and it's used to train teachers. The thing that we really focused on is mindful that we specialize in working with Title I schools and schools without money and without resources. Every single piece of technology that we use goes from a box to a garden in 45 minutes if you're a man, and 15 minutes if you're a woman, because you will read the directions and watch the video. So it is absolutely designed to be seamless. We don't deal with school construction. We don't deal with facilities. We don't want to take on those massive projects because that's not our wheelhouse. Negotiating with facilities and getting that thing done can take years. And my children need good education each and every day. So that's kind of how we go about it. We've made it turnkey. And therein for us is what works well for us and what we're seeking to do. We're not focused on real high output. We're real of food. We're really focused on high outcomes of high performing schools. And some of the best schools and some of the best performance we've generated to date are schools that we've been able to work with online and just send our technology over and our know-how over and then communicate online. So it's interesting. That's why I went at you, Samantha, because I was just fascinated about that. You know, there's only so many schools you can visit in New York City.
Well, it's
there's 1,700 schools you can visit in New York City.
Right.
That's
Actually,
what happened.
1,830. I was with the chancellor
go.
last week. Yeah. So, I mean, but in terms of everybody everywhere needs good food. That's our mindset. Thank you for correcting me.
as it's interesting to have everyone's perspective on this, because again, Teens for Food Justice comes at it from yet a different lens, where we do work with the SCA and we do work with facilities and we do take on those massive projects because one of our goals is high tonnage. Also, we only work with Title I schools because that's usually where the access to healthy foods is lowest. And so by installing this infrastructure that can allow us to grow thousands of pounds at any particular site, we can make that change within the community. So rather than being able to have a presence at hundreds of schools, we have 6 within the city, 1 out in Denver with a few more in the pipeline. That segues into my next question, is for Alex. So as a retailer of a hydroponic system whose efforts are to help a school bring in hydroponics into the school, how has your experience been? What are some of the obstacles or maybe challenges you didn't see when working with a bureaucracy like the DOE or school systems?
Well, there's definitely plenty of bureaucracy. I think for us, it's, we take a step back and think about where we started from. And like, we were looking at humanitarian applications for indoor farms. And I think having built a couple of small scale indoor farms, we realized just how cumbersome it was. And for most educators, most students, it is tricky to do. It's maybe fun to do it once, and it's even harder to maintain it for the long run. So what we saw was that these were sort of part-time projects that fell by the wayside, and that was a very common theme. So for us, when we were developing our farming platform, we were looking at like, how do you run these farms remotely in a way that is safe, reliable, and convenient for students, staff, teachers. And we work throughout the kind of institutional food service space, a lot of education, but also in corporate settings. And by addressing those kind of blockers, we found that people actually love it. If they're able to just plant and harvest and kind of get the good bits of growing without all of the little science experiment that you have to run every day. And I think that's where we maybe feel a slightly different need that's very complementary to everyone on this call is, we're here to make it really easy so people get growing. And then what they do with that is maybe where you guys come in, because what we're seeing across our client base, especially in the education sector, is people have all sorts of different ways to use the produce, whether that's in the classroom or in the cafeteria, wherever it might be. And I think the bureaucracy there, we circumvent that, but there are definitely some challenges getting farms installed into schools generally. So I think that's a hurdle that you have to overcome.
Absolutely. I mean, I can completely attest to the difficulty of the ongoing logistics of maintaining an indoor farm in a school. It isn't something that you can just set up once, and then once you have that good first harvest, pack it away. It really takes a culture within the school of support, not just, the people that work, within our organization, but also the administrative staff, the security, the custodial staff. Everyone has to be on board. And we have found that that's been our experience. Once they kind of wrap their heads around what we're trying to provide, they're very enthusiastic about it, but that doesn't make it less of a lift.
Exactly. You guys do it well, man. I'm laughing. You guys really, hats off to you. You guys really do it well.
Again, thank you. I've heard all three legs of, I think, of the stool brought up STEM education, workforce development, food production. And so I with the caveat of not one being more important than the other, but maybe if we could go into why we chose the particular route we did, because I don't know that you can do all three as effectively, or at least by trying to do everything at once, you do compromise the quality of all three. So Samantha, would you kind of go into your workforce development?
Sure. So the reason our school underwent such a massive initiative is that we recognize that in our state in Pennsylvania, the top three job sectors in need of graduates, skilled graduates, would be technology, medical, and ag. So we did an analysis with the Department of Labor to determine really where we could fit that model of a family sustaining job. So I was fortunate that out of those kind of three prongs, my main focus, my main directive is putting kids into jobs, or getting them the skills necessary that they recognize that, hey, maybe this isn't the best job for them, but maybe there's another path that they could try to pursue. So there was a lot of data that went into kind of our initial build, but then we also opted to build something that was, I mean, I want to say beautiful enough, pretty enough that our teachers then wanted to push in and community members wanted to come in. So we kind of hit the mark across the board by focusing just on saying, hey, we want your kid to have a job. We want them to move out when they hit 18. We don't want them to live in your basement forever, which is no shame in that game. If anyone's on here and still living in their parents' basement, that's an important kind of hurdle that some people need to go through. Don't get me wrong. But I at least want you to be able to enter the workforce knowing that you can do it, and that you like what it is that you are trying to pursue. There's not that shock of starting a job and then freaking out because it turns out you hated it and you just spent $120,000 on college and now you don't know what you're going to do.
Have you worked with or developed any like CTE programs or ongoing, or I guess you would say continuing education?
So we are multi-pronged. We're a charter school, so we're not permitted to run a specific CTE program, but the way we move around that is we offer everything from job shadowing to mentoring. We offer internships and independent studies. We have volunteer hours for students as well. So although ours isn't specifically categorized that way, we do fall into multiple buckets just by the different sessions that we offer. I know, Manuela, you said hydroponics and aquaponics. We also do aeroponics. We hatch chickens. We do soil-based agriculture. So we try to pull in a lot just based on what that hiring need is in the state. And then we build out those workforce development programs around it. And then if there is a specific employer that is large enough that we will welcome them to donate things to our space as well, because I can throw kids at it. They can try out your equipment. They can figure out how to troubleshoot it, with the end goal being, if they can prove themselves as a student, that they can actually get a job with them or an internship with an outside group as well.
It brings up an interesting point because that's a very long, it's a long-term vision. That's, you're playing the long game to bring students in and, on the other end, either fit them with a sustaining job or at least the knowledge that this isn't something that they wanted to do. And it seems like the systems that Babylon has are very simpatico with the paradigm that Green Bronx Machine and New York Sunworks are adopting. But I want to put it to our friends at Green Bronx Machine and New York Sunworks. If the students don't have this in-depth, nitty-gritty, experience, then how do you make the interaction with their systems and hydroponics more impactful? I mean, clearly it worked for me. I did not have an indoor vertical farm in any of the schools, even up until I got through my bachelor's, and yet here I am. So it is possible, and I'm wondering if you all have any thoughts on that, or successes that you've found, ways to make it impactful while still giving this more surface level but easily digestible and spread form of hydroponics.
I'll let Stephen go first.
Listen, what we do is clearly, well, thank you for that. We cultivate an appetite. I hate to use a cliche, but we truly cultivate an appetite. What most people don't realize is that, Green Bronx Machine locally has partnered towards 2,200 living wage jobs. We tend to thrive. My background was in workforce development with overage, undercredited children. We've gone on to be the building blocks, who went on to be the building blocks of some of the more impactful long-term organizations in this city, including Sustainable South Bronx. But fundamentally, the schools that we touch are so under-resourced and simultaneously over-extracted, if you will, that the number one things these young people need is good pedagogy in classes. We thrive in communities that are geographically and economically isolated. We don't get the best faculty. So creating an appetite, if you will, is the first and foremost thing that we do. Making connections for older age, undercredited youth to come to school to see the connect. It's tough to tell a young man or woman who's on the streets, perhaps not engaged fully in proper civic engagement with maybe some with a side hustle, to really come to school for 6 months, continue.
He was just getting to the good bit.
Opportunities, that is a meaningful carrot for us. And that's the way that we choose to go about the work that we do. For me, public schools are the greatest, and I love charter schools. So I'm really fascinated. I've done a lot of work in charter schools, and I do work in both charter schools and private schools. But the greatest lever this nation has for equity are our public schools. So supporting them in the most turnkey, accessible, non-monetized manner, no matter where the money's coming from, be it a grant or the government or some kind of subsidy, or the private sector, who can also be very kind. We believe that it's got to be as locally driven as possible. And, the greatest thing that we have in our wake is an incredible network of highly successful public schools in low-income communities. And similarly, in private schools, we have some of the best schools in the nation that have adopted our model, in the world that have adopted our model. So we've been thoughtful and deliberate. Mindful, you got to meet people where they're at. And for me, the hat I wear most is that of a school educator as opposed to a hydroponics expert. I'm not. I kill a lot more plants than I grow. I only post pictures of the living ones.
Well, I feel like anyone who's done any grow ops over any time, whether they make it to harvest, I've not grown any plants in our farms that we haven't killed. Most of them end up on a plate, but all of them end up harvested.
That's a good point. That's the best
put that
place
out
to kill
there.
them.
Yeah, we're not an arboretum. We don't make bonsai trees. So just because you kill a plant doesn't mean you weren't successful.
Exactly.
Manuela, could you maybe speak to your experience? And again, this is, how do you make the interaction or the I want to say user, but the student experience meaningful, given that it's not as complex on the systems end?
Yes, well, the way that we design our classrooms make the first impression very appealing, not only to the students, but also to the adults who come in. And I want to say 83% of our partner schools are Title I. So we are also in neighborhoods that have no other programs, and schools who have no necessarily quality science education, and they definitely don't have access to fresh food in most cases. Definitely don't have access to other technology than the one we bring. So it is very appealing and very engaging to run into a New York Sunworks classroom, and the kids really want to just be part of that experience. We do train the teachers not only on how to use the technology and implement the curriculum, but also really to manage the expectations in the classroom, because it is as exciting as going to recess or going to in a field trip. So that's a plus, and I think we all see that with the schools and the students we work with, regardless of the age. The older they get, it's true that life might get tougher, and the less engaged in school some of the students may become. But we do have reports from teachers that the students choose to be in the classroom in the school, to attend school when they have to attend our science class. So that's very encouraging. And because of that is that we developed our certification for high school students, the workforce development, the branch of workforce development that we pilot this summer. So we've trained this past summer about 40 students in different labs, our classrooms, also in those neighborhoods that needed more support and equity and quality education. And it went really well. It was very exciting to see that the first-hand approach and interaction with the technology, for some first time, others had been through our program before. It was really engaging and providing what we wanted really, and opening a path for a career for the students that had that interest. So I think even though it may seem simple, sorry, phone is ringing. It may be simple technology or simple access to harvest, and it may seem repetitive for some people. It really opens so many avenues for learning. And as you mentioned, it takes quite a time to become a real an expert. And you can also deep into your expertise. You know, you can just farm traditional leafy greens, but then you can become really the best in basil, or how to grow faster or more flavorful, or maybe different varieties of some sort of crop. So there is a lot to do within the seed to harvest process, and we offer that opportunity to the students as they grow.
So what I heard you just say is you do have a workforce development aspect with a certification as part of the services that you offer.
Exactly, we do have it. So we do K through 12, but we do the workforce development within the high school time. So we are very focused on that age time. As of now, we are within the K to 12 years of experience, and the certification falls within our high school curriculum. So that's part of our program. But the specific certification, which has additional concepts such as food management or packaging or distribution, some other areas of the concept of farming, is part of that specific course that we provide as a separate, as an elective during school time, or as a summer program that we launched this past summer. So we plan to continue doing the summer training as we continue working with more and more high schools in the city.
That's fantastic. The workforce development, developing a CTE track, I know is something that TFFJ is values and is putting significant resource towards establishing, and it's not easy to do, and none of this really is very simple. But that made me think of a question. Alexander is representative of the person who would hire the students that are going through this program. So I would like to ask Alex, what within workforce development, what subsets of skills would be the most appealing to you as someone who produces a hydroponic system and helps install these farms? What would stand out to you on a resume for a potential hire?
Yeah, I guess I start with a disclaimer that our fully distributed model is probably not that representative of your conventional greenhouse or large scale farm today. That being said, there are similar aspects. We also grow plants. I think for us, we look at the technical aptitude, particularly around software and data analysis, and not even that they can do a lot of that, but that they're aware of the tools that are available and kind of take that data-driven mindset. And then I also think we've got a bunch of people on the team who have just that introductory level of whether it's pest management, basic kind of horticultural knowledge. I think that's super valuable. And it's interesting for us, our model, I think where Stephen and Manuela take the education, the development piece so much further than we do. But I do think just this entry level, I have grown something, I enjoyed it, that is more than most people. And just getting people to that point where they're I'm engaged with growing, I'm interested in this field, that is already a huge step in the right direction. So I think that's where perhaps what we sell and then the distributed farms can kind of contribute to this broader workforce development angle.
I'd like to chase that thread a little bit more because I mean, I agree. Having interviewed people to help us install our farms or our new farmer educators, which is what we call our farm operators. Yeah, most people don't have even like cursory agricultural experience. So it's great to have that vibe to say, oh, I grew something and I really enjoyed it. But and this is an open question. What metrics, what means of concrete measurement really makes that workforce development program, CTE or otherwise, meaningful? Because it's great to say, well, they went through the New York Sunworks work development, or they went through the Commonwealth work development program, but how does the industry know that's not just a rubber stamp? And maybe this is outside of the wheelhouse of this conversation, but I'm really interested to feel or like hear people's thoughts on that. And again, this is open. Anyone who feels the urge can just start talking.
Well, I guess in Pennsylvania, it's maybe a little bit different than New York, in that we have graduation pathways. So if students don't pass our state test, they have to take what's called an alternative pathway. So some businesses are going, ooh, like if you're not passing the test, then that could ding you in some categories. But in agriculture, that's really not the case. So what we're finding is the best thing to do is word of mouth. And it kind of goes back to one of the questions that one of the attendees asked about, what my main job is, aside from keeping everything alive in here, including the kids, is making sure I'm going out into the community and making them aware of our program. And we do what we refer to as badging or credentialing. So students can earn OSHA 10 certifications. They can do ServSafe. They can kind of pick from their own menu, if you will, of different things that they want to try out. But I invite the community to come in, and we do a pretty substantial amount of tours and marketing, just so the people across Pennsylvania know we exist, but more importantly, they know the content that our students cover. So if you are an intern and you've gone through our internship program, our volunteer program, and you're an operational farm or a greenhouse, and you've been here before, you've seen our students working in action. So it's pretty safe to say, basic food safety, basic HAZCOM, those soft skills. We make the kids give the tours. We make the kids go through and present their projects to the community in real time. So those kind of anecdotal items per se are, to me, what I'm hearing to be more valuable by hiring managers versus, hey, my students submitted an artifact and said that they did kind of an independent project related to ag. But again, that's mostly anecdotal that I'm hearing back from the community. And in part, that's because in Pennsylvania, all of the kids kind of have that piece of paper because it's a requirement for them to graduate.
I did hear two important things in there: OSHA certification and ServSafe. And perhaps that's the solution, is finding like a piecemeal suite of certifications that are third-party verified and they brought into the program. And that way we're not all reinventing the wheel with the Green Bronx machine hydroponicist certification. Is, well, they've got their OSHA 10, they've got their ServSafe certification. Maybe that's really the most effective way to do that. I would like to answer, or rather pose this question that Brian M. put out. He said, I'd like to know what efforts or links within their respective communities the panelists have made towards distributing, cooking, and processing the food that's grown within their communities or via their communities, given the steady, long-running trends of people eating away from home and cooking less. It seems that there's a lot of opportunity for collaboration with community restaurants and kitchens, et cetera. Really asking about, how are you thinking to best leverage your platforms after the products are harvested for the benefit of the end consumer? Stephen, you want to take this one?
Yeah, given that 40% plus of the people we serve are food insecure, one of the things that we did at Green Bronx Machine is we pioneered what I call tower to table to tummy. Literally in our classroom, we have a piece of low-cost equipment called the Green Bronx Machine Mobile Classroom Kitchen, which is Department of Ed certified and approved, UL listed. Again, just like the technology that we use to garden, this is a whole school kitchen. And it comes on a pallet, white glove assembled, and it goes into a school same day and is usable same day, so the kids get to cook on it. So literally, it's a very virtuous cycle. City Harvest uses it to train to use when they're giving out food to create actual lessons in the field. You could pick it up, throw it in the back of a van. And again, this low-cost item really makes the cycle virtuous. It allows you to go from growing food to cooking food to creating add value products. I want to circle back, Harrison, just on your last question as well, because I think a lot of listen, there's a lot of redundancy in this space for sure. And in some ways that's good. And in some ways that's bad. But I think, you know, the way you really quantify and get credibility around workforce development is just job placement. At the end of the day, you can have every degree in the world. I think we've all sat through enough professional development in our lives with people who are far more credentialed with us, with our heads sound asleep. But in communities like ours, it's about credibility that this program will lead to a job. So we know where our students work. And then the remarkable thing that I will share, and this was an absolute miracle to me, we built a foster care farm, a first foster care commercial farm for disconnected residential youth in Appalachia, the craziest place to try and do something like this. And what happened for young people, particularly people with trauma, when you talk about mindfulness and wellness and healing, these young men, they're in a residential treatment center. So you can only imagine they wound up not only producing and maintaining a farm that was profitable, they didn't want to leave. So we wound up, you know, what happened when they graduated, because statistically, you know, most people in foster care, and let's face it, that's a huge issue in this country that kind of dovetails into the communities that we're in. You know, after they age out, within 6 months, they're incarcerated, unemployed, homeless, addicted. So to be able to see these young men not want to leave and actually build a tiny village and an eco village complete with add value products that they've created really speaks to what is possible. So I think you have to kind of give them the path and let them find it, having great industry connections. And we're blessed in New York City to have them. A lot of our partners are national, so we've been able to do that. But at the end of the day, the ability to place a young person in a job, and all the skills that we talk about are great, but the one that we have forgotten is collaboration. You know, the ability for these young people to problem solve and get into places and spaces where collaboration and teamwork really, that's the key piece, because so many of them and us come from highly dysfunctional communities that you can show up with your game face on every day, but the larger systemic issues that impact like communities like ours are going to take systemic change. But when you get in there and you can fix something and grow something and are willing to come in there and kind of work to a greater end, that's where the real magic kind of happens. And I think, you know, literally what we all do is we grow. We grow vegetables and we grow people. But when you're growing people, they are certainly really adept at growing vegetables, given that the industry has tremendous technologies that all work.
Manuela?
Yes, thank you. I'm gonna take it, piggyback on what Stephen just said in terms of collaboration. I think that is the magic that happens when kids are exposed to this kind of technology and these experiences. And I think farming provides that as it's something that is embedded. And when for us, since we work with several grades within the same school, some of our classroom have 150 students coming in every single day. So it's really embedded within the experience. There's no way to have a implementation of the program and a successful classroom and class experience without that in aspect of collaboration. And the fact that the students need to grow from seed to harvest, and some will be focusing more maybe on the seedlings, maybe others will be focusing more on the NFT or on the vine crop, etc., depending on the grade and the curriculum, etc., what's the engagement. they all need each other, and others will be focusing on integrated pest management, and therefore they will need to, catch all those pests because all the kids are coming in as they are going into recess, and we have so many aphids that we need to deal with, and we welcome them. So there's no way that this will function otherwise, and that's the magic of it. And I think we all have to see that. I'm sure it's part of all of us, our everyday life, and it is really an important part. I want to emphasize, and thanks for bringing that, Stephen, because that aspect of collaboration that builds so much community and so much respect for each other and for everyone who participates, because there's also the ability to empower students' interest at their level. Some might be more interested in just growing and focusing on as I said, IPM, for example, and they are really into that. And others maybe just focusing on choosing seeds and what should be our best, or collecting seeds and creating a seed bank. So there's just so many aspects that allow a safe space for learning, and definitely based on that collaboration that is the base of functionality for this type of program.
I was struck by what you said, Stephen, and then also Manuela, you hit a very important keyword there. Is one was the fact that you're working, Stephen, with this foster farm, and it's such an incredibly vulnerable population, and you said, it provides them an experience that they just don't want to leave. And then you folded in there the term mindfulness, which is bantered about so much as to almost be rendered meaningless. But well, no, I'm not just being cynical. The reason I say that,
I agree with you. I think
vulnerable
you said it
populations,
elegantly and eloquently. Thank you for that.
in a vulnerable populations, in situations like foster care, or just going through living in an underserved community, the difference between mindfulness and hypervigilance is, it might seem pedantic, but it's miles apart. Because you're aware of your surroundings does not mean that you're having a pleasant experience or that it's de-stressing you. And Manuela, you said that it's a safe space for learning, which makes me think of the students that I've interacted with, even indirectly, where I realize that I've helped create just a safe space, and the impact that can have. Actually, it has me a little choked up right now, because once you build them, you realize how few of them there are. And I know, Alex, you are not necessarily working directly in schools, but your equipment is also a part of that.
Absolutely.
We're working with populations that have an abundance of inconsistency, and this hydroponics, indoor farming, highly regimented growing is consistent. Even if things go off the rails, even if there's gross parts where you have to clean out gunk or deal with biofilm, or it provides them something that you cannot buy in a store. Sorry to go on a tangent there, but that struck me, and it's just another reason why it's so important that we do what we're doing. And now I've completely derailed myself.
Harrison, I might just add, I think that's, people forget with growing, it's such an innately human thing, right? And so reconnecting people with their food, whatever shape or form that takes, is valuable, especially in the kind of formative years around workforce development. And, for us, we're in, I think 75 schools and universities around the country. While I'm not in there day to day, I see and hear the stories of kids who are just growing something. And, I think we're also, we hear technology bounded around this industry a lot. And I'd say for us, we develop all of this technology so that the end users don't know it's there. We really come at it from a design, user experience design perspective, and we're like, how do you just make sure it's safe and reliable for people to grow food without all of that science experiment in between? And that might be skipping some steps in the eyes of Stephen and Manuela, because there's value in those steps, but for a lot of people that's a barrier to entry. And it's if you can just get people growing, and you can put these in places where people see and feel and hopefully taste the produce, that is already part of this kind of transformational shift that I think the industry has the potential to do, and especially in the educational setting.
I mean, I would almost push back on the idea of skipping steps. I mean, we're doing the same thing with our systems. We started where our farm operators would be mixing fertilizers from dry constituent parts, and it was just so much extra work. So we're always looking for ways to engineer out those sorts of issues. And I don't think that it detracts from the user experience or the educational experience. I mean, even if you look at it from pure workforce development, is that a skill that they need to know? It's a very small margin of people working in agriculture will need to know how to mix from constituents. They will need to know how to interact with automation systems and different sensors and how to operate the systems. Yeah, like the bulk of them will. So I think that, you know, I'm sure there's a tipping point where we could automate these things to the point where it's no longer valuable to be in the school system. But I don't think anyone in this panel is near that point. I think we're all just coming at the same issue from a different perspective, and, you know, the right tool for the right job. So, Stephen?
You know, I'm glad you went off topic, and I went with you, Harrison, mindful of the time we spent together in Denver and, you know, some of the other sites of yours that I visited. Because one of the wildest things that I've seen with young people, and it continues to amaze me, and yeah, and I want to talk about all the boxes that we do need to check, is when we were in Denver and we met these kids who came through programs, aside from what they actually learned, their favorite thing was really kind of reading banned books. You know, these kind of programs led to kids reading banned books, addressing the school to prison pipeline in communities, in the exact communities we stood toe to toe in. It really got them thinking about LGBTQ, you know, kind of communities, and that plants work for everyone and what equity looks like, because plants work hard for everybody. They don't discriminate. They don't know who's raising them. So a lot of the larger kind of, and I'm glad you went there, because you can't really quantify that on a job application. But when you create participatory democracy by growing plants, that's really what this nation needs in communities like ours. And Alex, whether the things are engineered to take care of themselves, so children aspire to having these things in their communities, as opposed to just seeing them voyeuristically in wealthy communities. And they can take care of themselves, so people can either get the end benefit, which is cooking and eating, and the nutritional benefit. These are the things that I'm really so proud of to be in this space for. And, you know, my call to action is really that all of us collectively, and there are very different mindsets and very different models here, but, you know, I think there is a lot of duplicity in some regards and a lot of individuality. But my call to action is, I think the organizations in this space really need to work better together. And look, it's hard enough to run one organization, much less get on a call and be cordial to anybody else. I know that. But I think the more that we as an entity and a system, mindful we're all part of an ecosystem, can come together to be supportive and partner, I think therein lies tremendous potential to kind of impact exponentially. And to me, that's really important, both for the industry, which will benefit in terms of over-engineered products or engineered products, and most importantly for the communities and young people that we serve, and for the health outcomes. Because it's really exciting to see kids get really excited about eating healthy, which is something that is tantamount to what this work is all about, including workforce development and school performance. But, you know, to see kids who are able to eat themselves to good health because they now have access to it and want to, as opposed to eating themselves sick, diseased, and diseased because of what is being flooded into our communities, is also equally as important. You got to move kids to being producers. And when you move kids to being producers, you move them up the food chain. And that's important for everybody.
Well said. Manuela?
Yes, to answer the question that was asked before in terms of partnerships in the communities, that I think the way we address that is really making sure all the food, because, you know, it's hundreds of pounds of vegetables per year, and that's a part of the excitement also, and participate in all the harvests, etc. We make sure that those hundreds of pounds are distributed within the community. And during the pandemic, that was crucial and important for most of the families in our partner schools, and we just continue to do the same after the pandemic. So that brings a lot of excitement for the families, and another reason to be, if possible, in the school, but if not, having their students bringing that that fresh food home. That's how we focus on our program, and that's the first way of distribution that we push. Then the second tier could be connecting with other needs in the community. There's a lot of donations to food pantries when there's really so much food, more than what is needed within the community. So it's shared with food pantries. And then is when third tier would be maybe restaurants or others that in the community that may want to use. We usually don't get to the third level with restaurants. It's just one experience, one off here or there. It really is used within the school community.
Yeah, and that mirrors the experience of TFFJ as well. You know, we prioritize the produce going directly into the cafeteria, but then is direct community donations. After that would be organizations like City Harvest or food rescue organizations. And it would be nice to be able to, I guess, supply some amount of produce to a restaurant to perhaps generate revenue for sustainability, but you know, the needs greatest directly around the schools, so that's where the produce goes. I want to ask this question that was posted just recently. What is the biggest hurdle for general public adoption of hydroponics? Speaking from hydroponics education perspective, what is the most difficult part you've experienced? And I actually want to start this off with Samantha, specifically because you work with aquaponics, and I don't think that's been shouted out enough, because some of the first systems I designed were aquaponics, and it is more of an art than a science. It's very tricky, and so my hat is off to you. Part of the reason we practice traditional hydroponics is because of how difficult it can be to keep those three populations: your fish, your plants, and your microbes, which a lot of people don't really think about, but if they collapse, so does everything else. So because you are playing on hard mode, I'd like to get your idea on the biggest hurdle for general public adoption. And then Alex, I saw you had your hand raised.
So one of my biggest struggles is actually from the traditional farmer. They want to know what we're doing with soil-based ag. They want to know how this relates to what it is they're doing, and they want to know how I'm going to cut out the bottom line for them. And we're not a for-profit school. We did work with local restaurants before COVID. Just again, trying to get the word out. We wanted students to really experience the entrepreneurship wing of the sale process, but the money generated through the sale of produce was very, very low for us, because we only had a certain number of kids that were interested in that. So most of what we grew, we wound up donating, and we actually moved completely to that model when COVID hit. Everything we grow, it's either donated to families that come in and assist, or it goes to the Central Pennsylvania or Midwest food banks. But really our biggest hurdle was trying to convince the traditional farmer that we're not after them, and that what we are teaching students, what we're training them on, is actually applicable to their farms. Everybody here probably has heard the term silver tsunami. That's really coming about in the ag industry. Most of the ag farmers in Pennsylvania and across the United States are getting up there in years. They want to retire, but they have no one to backfill their positions. So it's really trying to convince them that we're not after them in any way, shape, or form, that we can be competitive with them, but that's not really our role as a school. What we're trying to do is prepare them to work, and they can work on your farm. They can help take over your farms. They can help produce on your farm, and they'll come to you with general ag knowledge. So that's been my experience, is just trying to get through that traditional farmer mindset.
That's awesome. Well, I echo everything Samantha just said. And then for us, like, I think it starts with creating a different experience that's more accessible to more people. And I think for all of the merits of kind of DIY hydroponics and doing that science experiment itself, I think the risk of failure there and the risk of disengagement is so high that without kind of supervision, which all of you guys have perfected, it's very hard for most people to be successful. And I think that's where technology and things like what we do and creating this kind of remotely managed experience can make it much stickier and make people much happier. And yet they're still able to get that kind of experience of planting a seed, watching it grow, eating it, which is really what it's about. And I think while we've removed a lot of steps, I think that is key to creating an experience that is really accessible to anyone without any prior experience. And so that's kind of how we view this space and on-site farming. I'd say the other bucket is funding. I'm sure everyone here has some stories of just hoops you have to jump through, especially in the public school system. But I think that funding awareness will become available when people know there's an experience that people can rely on.
Yeah, absolutely. Stephen, Manuela, anything you'd like to add in the biggest hurdles?
I think probably funding is one of the biggest to streamline it. We've been very successful and on bringing public support and private support, and that's why we've grown consistently. But their interest is really large, and therefore we could be in double the number of schools we are if we could have access to more quick and efficient funding. I just want to add quickly that we actually have a little under 40 aquaponics farms. So we are aware of the focus those require, but it is really exciting when you get to harvest those fish and we celebrate and we eat them also. So that's part of the fun.
I'm a big believer. Are you done, Manuel? I don't want to cut you off. Forgive me.
No,
Yeah.
I'm okay.
I mean, for us, make no doubt about it, funding is a challenge. I'm still an unpaid volunteer. I don't take a salary at my organization, but we specifically looked at a model that we looked at existing funding sources that existed. I want to be very gracious and shout out some of the larger organizations in our space, whether it's Newman's Own or Whole Kids Foundation, that a motivated teacher, at the end of the day, teachers change lives. It starts with a student, it starts in a classroom, and it starts with a robust experience no matter what it is. And that has to be teacher driven. Look, I'm in a school where we had some very amazing technology originally, and the schools couldn't support it. I was in a school with no internet. I was in a school with no drainage. The disparities between certain schools and certain communities is mind-numbing and mind-boggling. So we purposefully and deliberately set out on a model that anybody who wrote a grant could get from Whole Kids, Newman's Own, all the wonderful Grow NYC, and that would fund everything into perpetuity. So we set about this to be disruptive, mindful. We know that there is nobody on the white horse coming to our community more often than not. A lot of people are getting fed off the dysfunction of it, but we, no tiered fees, no annual subscriptions, unlimited professional development. Those are things that we take pride and parcel in a Green Bronx machine for being able to do. I don't have the patience as a building leader to really negotiate with school construction authority, but also my big challenge is that, you can create programming that generates success that principals can willingly write a check for, that then becomes something bigger. I will share one of the things that we were able to do on our own unique way is really create a market for entrepreneurship with the little guys around small farmers markets in upscale communities. Look, I have parents who are making $6, $7 an hour in an underground economy in our community. I certainly can't ask them, nor would I ever ask them to pay for the produce, the market price of produce that we have. But on the flip side, when you get these children out of their 6 or 8 block radius with no access to public transportation and see other people doing it, it's game changing. And the flip side to that even is during the pandemic. During the pandemic, I do want to shout out Gotham Greens. as a large supplier for actually donating so much produce. And there are countless other people, but Gotham really stands out as a great example. And I'll share with you why, because once we got that produce into people's hands and people started experiencing it and recognizing the connection that, oh, that's kind of like what my kid or my child or my grandchild is doing in school. Gotham Greens now has a large appetite. So we were now, our community has a large appetite for them. So we were really able to help Gotham grow market share and really push towards policy and making sure Fresh Direct was delivering and that items you can use, EBT and SNAP. So these were critical things. The other thing that I also think that's important for all of us, and mindful, I'm in the poorest congressional district in America, is not to devalue food, because food needs to have a cost. And listen, we are living in a world of abundance, so nobody should go hungry. I always say, you know, we can feed the poor, we just can't satisfy the rich. That's what half the battle is about in this nation. But when we start feeding children good food, they understand that that's something that they should be paid for and that food should be paid for. And we move away from this whole cheap and convenient to kind of fair and equitable. And that is a much larger conversation that this nation has to have. If we're going to produce the next generation of entrepreneurs who want to get into farming, who want to produce food. So, you know, there's a lot of double-headed monsters, so to speak, but for us, it just started by making it affordable, making it accessible, unlimited fee, unlimited site license, no annual fees, no tiered subscription. Those are the kinds of things that really keep people coming back. And, you know, we could talk about delayed progress. I'm very much into, delayed perfection. I'm very much into continuous improvement. And that's what we're seeing in all of our schools.
Absolutely. And lived experience is one of the best teachers. People remember who helped them. And once you can give them that tangible difference between cheap and easy and healthy and nutritious, they will trend towards the latter. You know, just because they live in underserved communities doesn't mean that they don't have the cognitive ability of everyone else. People know what's good for them and they want to be healthy. So on that, I'd like to thank all of my panelists, Samantha, Stephen, Alex, Manuela. Thank you so much. This has been a joy to moderate, and I really appreciate you all taking the time to be a part of AgTech Week and to be on this panel.
Listen, hats off to all of you. Harrison, I love seeing you out there. It was.
I'll jump in and thank you.
Come down there, you know. I'm thinking road trip, baby, road trip. So thank you all. And again, my collective call to action is, you know, let's all do better together. Because I think when we all win, everybody wins. And you know, here in New York City, this is a super exciting time, I think, for all of us. And, you know, across the city, I've been at a lot of schools in the past 2 weeks. The children are just so excited to be back, having nothing to do with hydroponics, just seeing kids back in school. But that growth mindset is very there, and nothing grows better than a seed in the ground or a seed in a piece of rock wool, especially as it starts getting cold outside.
Absolutely. Manuela?
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure to be here, to share the panel, to meet you, Samantha, and I can't wait to visit, to see you, Alexander. We have a lot to do. Same, Stephen, great conversation. And for you, Harrison, thank you so much. It was a pleasure to have this conversation.
Pleasure's all mine.
So just thank you guys. This has been an absolute pleasure. And, you know, I think you all know, but we're super open to partnerships of all shapes and sizes, and we just want to help more people get growing. So if you have any ideas, please reach out.
And I mirror what Alexander just said. And I would love to host anyone and everyone in our facility. We're all about getting the word out about sustainable forms of agriculture. So road trip, if anyone wants to come and visit me in Harrisburg, I'd love to host you.
Oh, I'm coming. I am
too.
I'm definitely seeing this facility. It looks amazing, and all I've got is a picture this big. So it looks amazing. All right.
And
Thanks,
come
everyone.
visit the Bronx, everybody. The Bronx is open too.